What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Big Thing. I'm excited for this episode, very much so. I get to talk to the Magic Man, Marc Bernardin. That's right. If you don't know Marc, you should. He is a very talented writer. He's a great podcaster. If you don't know him from the Fatman on Batman show that he does with Kevin Smith, and I am just going to be very excited to talk to him about a few different topics. Obviously, the Batman. We'll talk about that and his thoughts about what's coming up. I actually, before I even started recording, he and I were talking, and I want to tell him, because I'm kind of it's funny because people come up to me sometimes and be like, "Hey, guess what I watched in Star Wars and everything too," and that's how I feel when I'm talking to Marc about Batman, because I'm doing all the rewatches of Batman right now. So I want to go over like my thoughts on the shit that I saw, and he can tell me why I'm wrong. So I'm looking forward to that for sure, because there's a lot of things. I don't know, like, yeah, I'm excited for this one. But the main thing, as you saw, as I'm going to put in the title on this, I really have been waiting to talk to someone about Arcane. And I asked him, I said, dude, did you happen to see Arcane? Cool if you didn't. He's like, oh, yeah, I did. And I was like, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Arcane. I can't wait. I can't wait to talk about Arcane. You guys have recommended it to me, and I watched it, and I thank you so much. It was such a great gift. But before we get into that, before we bring Marc in here, I wanted to remind you guys, hit subscribe. As I've been telling you before, show a little bit of class, will you? Just show an ounce of class. That's all we're asking for in this place. Show some class and hit that subscribe button. The notifications also. And if you haven't done it already, look at the Apple Podcasts, little logo we got. We got Spotify. Spotify's working. Spotify's doing some things for us. All right, listen, enough with me. We're bringing in Marc Bernardin. Let's do it. It's the big thing. Boom. What's up, everybody? It's the big thing. It's me. What else are you expecting? Well, good. We got some stuff to talk about, man. We got some stuff. And in order to do that, I got to talk to someone. I can talk to myself. You guys are bored with that at that point. And I'm losing my mind. So I don't want to do that. I want to have someone to talk to. And talking to that person right now, the one and the only, Marc Bernardin is here, ladies and gentlemen. Marc Bernardin. Marc, how you doing, man?
Good, Kristian. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. I'm excited to talk to you about a great many things. Let's get into it. Let's just start with this gem. Let's start with Arcane, League of Legends. All right, so I'm going to tell you kind of how this came about. What I also tell everybody here is that I don't know what Marc thought about it. He might not like it. I have no idea. We're going to find that in a second. But I will tell you that I'm kind of a casual animation fan. You know, like there's certainly for me it's Rebels, it's Clone Wars. I watched when the Star Wars. What was the one that just came out that they did?
The Bad Batch.
Well, the Bad Batch, yes, but the other one that they did, the Japanese kind of anime. Oh,
Visions. Yes, Star Wars Visions.
I watched Visions, and then I watched Masters of the Universe. Right, I watched so those are kind of the animations. I dabble in it, but I'm not like a hardcore. So when they're like Arcane, I go, I don't know what that is. And they're saying, I'm telling you, you're going to like it. It's science fiction. It's fun. I go, I'm not a big gamer. They're like, watch it. Dude, this is some of the best science fiction stuff, in my personal opinion, I've seen in like the last 10 years. It had emotion. It had, like the animation is gorgeous. The fighting was crazy. They didn't hold back on not just the violence side of it, because it wasn't just violent to be violent. It was like effective violence. So I was over the moon about it. What say you?
I am a little bit more, I suppose, an animation person than you are. I'm not like anime is my big blind spot, just because there's so much of it. It's almost impossible for me to know where to dive in. I'm sure people will tell me, just watch Attack on Titan, just watch Fooly Cooley, just watch One Punch Man, just watch, whatever, Dragon Ball Z. It's all too much. But, I was a Batman the Animated Series guy. I was a Looney Tunes guy. Thundercats and Master of the Universe and Silverhawks and
Silverhawks.
Silverhawks.
Nice.
Like it was way more like my childhood than it was my adulthood. But I will still dive when the diving looks good. And I remember seeing the first trailer for Arcane, and I said, "Oh my God! Like, how much money did they spend on this?" And then talking to friends who work in animation, they were like, "Oh, they spent all of the money." Like, that's not TV money. That's not movie money. That's video game money. That's we make more in microtransactions in a week than any movie will have ever made ever.
Yeah.
And they spent all of it on making a video game. And so it is the most amazing looking animation I've ever seen. But like that's not enough, right? Because you sit down, it's like, oh, that's gorgeous, and then you just move on. But it took me like 2 or 3 episodes to really like kind of dig my heels into it and see it for what it was. Because at first it seems very here's a shiny world and here's the dark world.
Right.
And the shiny world is rich and has advancements, and the dark world is like kind of broke and they're scrabbling. And it's that same kind of fantasy construct that we've seen 1,000 times.
Yep.
But then they dig deeper into it. Then it becomes his character story. And then the thing that happens in like episode 4 happens. Yep. And then suddenly it becomes this very sad tragedy of a story about 2 people who are just separated by fate and happenstance and accident, who should be thick as thieves, but are now dire enemies. And that part of it is kind of what completely switched me on to it, for real.
And this is why you are the writer, because you just sold that show to everyone, right? To me, and I already watched it. It is absolutely everything that you just said and more, where it is exactly that. What I really liked, and because I don't want to spoil it for a lot of people, because I don't feel a lot of people know about it enough, because I'm still telling people about it and they're like, what's that? Like, it's all my brother's not same type of casual animation guy that I am, and he trusts me, so he watched it. Now he's obsessed with it, and now he's doing research on it, waiting for season 2 and all that. But it's exactly what you said. What they do that's very interesting in this show is they get you involved in a certain story that you think's going a particular way, and then they flip it on its head. And when they do it, it's like, you would think, oh, really? Well, I thought I wanted to follow that, but I never felt that way. From the way that they set up the world that's so rich, and all the rules and the ideas, and there's so many like side stories that are going on that it had like a Game of Thrones type thing to it, where I cared about these little stories. And when it switched to whether it was the politics of the world or like, and everybody had like a thing, whether it was so the enforcers, for those people out there who haven't seen it yet, the enforcers are like the cops of, as Mark was saying, like the upper like privileged group. And at first you're like, oh, I'm going to hate them. But then they humanize some of them, and they understand why they do so much. And the writing, and that's what I wanted to ask you, as far as like, because I'm sure you watch everything you watch with such a different eye because you're a writer. What did you think about the overall writing of this series?
I mean, it does this thing where, it exactly what you said. It leads you down a particular road that you think it's going to travel. And then about halfway down that road, where you begin to make assumptions and you begin to have like, oh, I've seen 1,000 of these. Here's what's going to happen. And it's just to feel as if you can predict it. And then the event happens. And I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that there's a time jump involved.
Yeah.
Which can either, incredibly aid a TV show, or it can just be a sort of cheap gimmick. But when it works because it becomes an emotional sort of reset for where the characters are. Yeah. And what began to feel predictable suddenly became surprising, and they treat things like, mental illness or sort of dissociative personality disorder or whatever you want to call it in a very fair and very sort of even way. And they dramatize it in ways you can only do in animation, right, which made it feel really, really sort of tangibly unsettling to a character you don't want to be unsettled by, because she's tragic.
Super tragic, and there's a lot of heartbreaking stuff. And I like you said, you don't necessarily even the main villain, where you're against him for the majority of it, but even when they let you know, it's like that Thanos thing. It's like, no, I don't agree with you, but I understand why you're doing what you're doing. Like,
right? Like, I get it.
Yeah, I get
it. But I get
it. But I get it. And I also like that they put Snarf in this. I was waiting. I was waiting.
Oh, Lion-O.
Where's the enforcers? But no, even as I joke about it, I thought that was a way that they did some stuff too. Is they have these other life forms, and they don't over analyze why these things are there or what it is. They're just there. And
Yeah, we're
it's
not
like,
explaining anything.
no, it's like the New Hope style. It's like they're not going to tell you why all those ships are there and how they've been beat up and all this stuff. It just is, and that's what I loved about it. Like there's different alien species. There's always these things walking around, but that's just the way the world is. And I might have missed this. Is it Earth like in the future, or what is it? Did they ever say?
You know, it's unclear. I don't think they ever say that there was like an Earth that was, or in the ashes of the old world or whatever.
Right.
But I mean, there's lots of place names that don't sound like anything that we've ever heard before. But it's unclear if it's like deep future, if it's past, if it's alternate world, if it's just something else completely different. I don't know, but I love a good deep world.
Yeah, who cares? As long as I just wouldn't know if I missed it. I'll tell you what. The biker gang in Boba Fett episode 3 could have been in this show and it would have looked more in place than it did in Boba Fett. I'll tell you that.
Oh, Boba Fett.
I don't know where you stand on Boba Fett.
I stand apart.
You stand apart.
I stand apart. It's a hard thing because mystery is one of the like chief tools of storytelling, right? Like sometimes you let the audience or the reader or the viewer or whatever do all of this work in their head to make something cool. You give them a little bit and then they start to embroider and they start to build, a mythos. And like, that's what Boba Fett was for like 30 years, where like we knew almost nothing about him other than cool armor. Fucking like he got Han Solo. That's badass.
Yep.
And then, died rather ignominiously as far as we knew. But the fact that we were then
screaming like a little biatch.
Yeah. So like the fact that we were then able to sort of just live in this world of, but he's cool. How cool is he? Well, he's one of the most dangerous, no disintegrations. He tells him like he's a dude who just disintegrates. That's his fucking thing. He disintegrates. Don't do that this time. To start answering those questions, like this show begins to feel to me a bit like the midichlorians of TV shows, where I didn't need answers for any of these questions. I didn't need any of these backstory filled in for me. I just didn't need it. Like, it's not making him a richer character. It's answering questions that maybe fans had, but isn't telling me a particularly new story. So I wanted pulp. I wanted adventure. I wanted bounty hunting. I wanted doing stuff. I wanted kicking ass. And this is a very, relatively un-ass kicky show.
So I was confused twice by this show. In the first side of it, it was called The Book of Boba Fett, and I think that we all do exactly what you just said, right? We start to have these kind of cool expectations in our heads of what we want it to be about. And the Book of Boba Fett, I thought, oh, well, maybe we're going to go through either times of his life and chapters of his life where we see like when he's doing a side mission for Vader in the Empire times, or maybe there's some stuff right outside of how he starts to get into it right after the Clone Wars and each chapter. And that's what I thought they were going to do with the flashbacks. And then when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, they're going straight up like Sopranos style, and they're going to do a gangster story. And it's really not that. He's more like the new sheriff in town than he is like the gangster. And I will say, there's a lot that I don't mind. I happen to agree with everything that you just said as far as what they're doing and not keeping the mysteries. But I'm enjoying it because to me, it's the same thing where I love pizza. Sometimes the pizza's really good. You're not going to see me. I'm going to bury myself in my office and eat it. But even if it's bad, I'm still going to eat it. And that's kind of how I feel about Star Wars design. I don't think it's bad. I think there's a lot of stuff in it I like. But I do think it was one of the initial problems that I had when they first announced the Disney takeover of they're going to do a Yoda movie. They're going to do a Boba Fett. They're going to do Han Solo. It's like Mandalorian has proven. If you come up with new characters, even if the familiar Mandalorian, like, Boba Fett looking armor or whatever, you get more of a pass from people because you're creating these characters, new things we don't learn, and there's no expectations. And that's what I think is the problem with whether it's putting Luke in Last Jedi and making changes in the way that they did, or this, because of that. So I'm hoping that whether it's the Acolyte, Obi-Wan's going to have the same type of challenge, because of what you're saying, how much mystery, what was he doing on Tatooine? Does he go off world? All of it. But I trust in Deborah Chow and what she's going to do. So I'm pretty excited for that series.
Yeah. Like I can't say that I hate this either, and I'm fully aware that like I can have my own expectations for a show and then come into it and be pleasantly surprised.
Right.
Like I'm allowed to be wrong, just as I'm allowed to have, hopes and dreams. That's totally fine.
Yep.
There was some tweet, I can't remember who said it, but he's like, how weird would it be if they said, we're going to make a Star Wars show, and they made one about a stormtrooper, and then we're going to get another Star Wars show, and it's another dude in the same exact helmet.
Right.
And like, was there no other speeds we could go? Like,
Yeah. I think that what it was, though, I think it was Favreau. I think Favreau, from what I heard, how true it is, I don't know, but from what he pitched, and he like, because they were like courting him to do like a movie for a while, and then he was in a conversation with him and Filoni, obviously worked together with Clone Wars and Rebels, and I think that he really wanted to do a Boba Fett thing, and as a Mandalorian, and they're like, well, he's not really a Mandalorian, he's this and this, so they started to develop and came up with the Mandalorian show, but Boba Fett was Favreau's favorite. And so he wanted to write this, and maybe kind of like the side deal that they gave him, that they'll let him do a side story with Boba. I don't know.
Yeah, and listen, I was also kind of underwhelmed by the beginning of The Mandalorian.
Oh, okay.
By the time you get to the end of the first season, like, I was kind of on board, and all of the second season, I was there for it. So I don't discount the ability of Favreau and Filoni to stick the landing.
Yeah.
I just think that at this point, this show, it's got a higher degree of difficulty to stick that landing for me. And the fact that there is no Baby Yoda to distract me from the fact that I'm not that thrilled with the way we're not sticking the landing. I was like, there's no shiny here yet.
Rancor is not doing it for you?
It is not doing it for me. It's like, is that a fucking Baby Yoda? Is that Baby Yoda the cutest thing in the world? Oh my God, look at fucking Baby Yoda.
Right.
Boba Fett just doesn't have that yet. Other than Tamura Morrison keeps saying, I am Boba Fett. I am Boba Fett. I am Boba Fett. Boba Fett.
Funny you say that. I was on my last review, I said that they should make a WWE type shirt that says I am Boba Fett, except it's got to have somebody in caption going, who cares, dude? Because he says it to everybody. And did you see, I forget, did you see the last episode?
Yeah, I did.
So he grabs the little droid kills the little droid. I am Boba Fett, and the droid shuts himself off. I'm like, dude, you just did what half of us want to do. But either way, that even though, like, and as I said, I look forward to the show because I'm a Star Wars guy. But I will say that before we started recording, you brought up the show that I think was a big surprise to everybody. That's really kicking everyone's ass in a good way, and that's Peacemaker. DC has, to me, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, DC to me has shifted their tone dramatically in the last 4 years, and I think have just gotten on track and embraced kind of their lunacy overall. And this show, the Suicide Squad, to me was so unexpected, and I just loved it. I loved it. And so I wouldn't have given a shit about this series had I not seen that, obviously. I love this show. I think it's perfect for James Gunn. I think James Gunn's better with DC than he is Marvel, personally. But I'm curious where you stand on all this.
Yeah, I mean, I liked the Suicide Squad far more than I liked Suicide Squad.
No.
And the difference in the article preceding says everything. But wasn't the hugest fan. Like, I liked all of the actors, especially David Dastmalchian, who I will always sort of ride or die for, because that dude is just bleeding pathos wherever he goes. And so, the minute he shows up, oh, all right, I see what we're in for. Mm-hmm. I liked it, I didn't love it. And I wasn't over the moon thrilled for Peacemaker. But, I'm the guy that I am. I'm still a nerd, even if I have issues with the nerddom. And so I was going to tune in and watch it, and then found myself incredibly captivated by it because it does the thing that TV gets to do that movies don't, which is it gets to dig deep into character. It gets to pick one or two people and excavate their lives. And so to understand why Peacemaker is Peacemaker, to understand why that dude is as, daffy and shallow, but open and candid at the same time, and funny and tragic and horny and everything. He's a broken man who was broken in very specific ways. Yeah. And I think that James Gunn really likes playing with broken people. And so this feels to me emotionally resonant in a way that Guardians never had a chance to, that Suicide Squad doesn't, simply because we're getting 7 hours of this guy,
right?
And why he's this way. And it reminds me a lot of The Boys, which I did not expect The Boys to be as sort of finger on the pulse of a show that it was, and to be about things like supremacy and things like privilege, and to introduce a character like Stormfront, and for have Homelander to be the guy that he is, which in this current world stage that we're playing on is incredibly relevant. Didn't see that coming. And I think that the story between Peacemaker and his father, the White Dragon, and what it's like to have to go home to Thanksgiving and discover that, oh yeah, the person who is supposed to love me and that I love despite them may or may not be hateful and full of hate.
Yeah, so hateful and so blatantly hateful towards his own son. Like just telling him straight out didn't want him, all these things. It's brutal on a lot of and Robert Patrick plays it so well. And I think, and John Cena, to me, this is the best role he's ever played. There's no doubt. And I think that's all. It's a testament to, you look at what James Gunn, and that has nothing to do with the wrestlers. It's just the reference of Batista, what he did with Dave Batista and what he did with John Cena. He takes these, he really knows how to get the best out of them, and has done it so well, because I loved Cena in Peacemaker. That was one of the things, because I always thought he's just okay. Sometimes I feel he was a little too cheesy or over the top. Like Bumblebee, I didn't love him in that movie, right? There's tons of it, but this, for some reason, he's really gravitated towards this role for everything that you just said. Like you care about him, but he's such a douche sometimes, right? And he's laying on the bed at the one point, and he knows he's being a dick, and he's like, no one likes you because you're such a dick. You could be friends. But what I really love about the show, and I think it's also going into that point of what you said, what you can get away with in TV that you can't get in movies, is that this show consistently does this in every episode. There'll be a conversation that they're having about the plot that's specific to the plot, and one little sentence will be thrown out. It could be about a salami sandwich, and it could then turn into a 3-minute bit. And I love it. And at first I was like, oh, are we going to do this all the time? And then now I find myself waiting for it. It's just so funny. It's just so funny. And Gunn's really clever, and he gets to like kind of take his gloves off, wrap it around with glass, and go straight up kickboxer style with Van Damme.
Yeah, no, it's very Muay Thai. It's very
It
kumite. It's
really
kumite television. And I'm here for it, because I mean, Gunn is super smart. He seems to have something he wants to say about the world, and he's using this as the kind of candy coated pill to get us to swallow it. And I really appreciate it.
Do you like right now? Do you agree with the assessment as far as that, how DC is kind of shifted over the last 4 or 5 years? And because I remember that there was one point. I remember being on AMC Movie Talk and everything that they were doing, it looked like they were trying to model their style after what the MCU was doing. And then at one point they shifted the execs and they said, fuck this. And they start, like, whether it's Joker and Shazam, and this kind of connects. It doesn't. Who gives a shit? Just enjoy it. And now you got the Batman coming out, and they just seem like they have hit their stride on what they're doing now.
Yeah, I think they figured out that they could not beat Marvel at Marvel's game.
Right.
And that they were, 5 or 6 years behind the ball. And so they're trying to play catch up. And so, then you get the sort of Man of Steel and Batman v Superman and Wonder Woman and Justice League as the sort of 4-movie push towards getting to Avengers, ultimately. And it was too fast. It was too fast. It didn't have the sort of depth that Marvel gave us, didn't have the variety that Marvel gave us.
Right.
So it just didn't hit the way they expected it to. And so I do appreciate somebody saying, you know what, our ground game isn't working, let's go to the air. And what's our air game? Like, we're not connecting any of these dots. Like, we're embracing the multiverse, and I think it's a thing that and I'm ascribing quite a bit of intention to, that they might have gotten from TV. Like Legends of Tomorrow is as goofy and batshit crazy and a little bit detached from reality as anything that sort of James Gunn is doing. Like, they're doing everything. It's like, we're making an anthology show that happens to have same people on the same ship, and there's time travel, there's dimension hopping, and there's like doppelgangers and evil this, and all of it is being contained somehow within that show. And so the ability to then take that to the movies and say, you know what, we're 100% going to do a comedy of Shazam, and we're going to do the Batman, a 3-hour long, what looks to be like the darkest detective movie in the history of detective movies.
We'll get into that. That's crazy. 3 hours long. Yeah.
You know, you get Peacemaker, you get Suicide Squad, you get Batgirl coming, you get Blue Beetle, you get Flash with old Batmans, you get all of these things that could not be contained in a single universe, and they don't seem to care. And so, whether or not I think that their batting average is as high as Marvel's is to a certain degree irrelevant. But they're now playing their own game, and they're the only ones playing this game, which means that they get to win on their terms.
And they're putting out cool shit now too. And so where it was like they weren't just, as you said before, like were they going after the same kind of model, and then they try to lighten certain things up, and it wasn't working the right way. And now whether it's Joker or like we just get right into it, the Batman in general, right? So the Batman, when casting was going out, so Roxy Stryer and I were on, it was Collider Live, and the casting was starting to get rampant, and we both had brought up, we thought Robert Pattinson would be fantastic, right? Because just I had just seen The Rover, I think, at that point, and I think Good Time, whether or not it had come out or not, it maybe just had come out, but I was like, people are sleeping on this guy because obviously they stereotype him because of Twilight, And now, after you look at what Matt Reeves has done with Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and his horror senses of what he's also worked on in the past, I feel like this could be, and 3 hours long. I'm skeptical, but less skeptical of 3 hours because it's Matt Reeves. But I am so excited for this because it's Seven, it's Zodiac, it's they're going to change it a little bit. But have you liked what you saw so far in the trailers?
I think I've sort of loved it,
Okay.
like it's none more dark. You can't get like blacker or bleaker than this.
Yeah.
And I'm also excited about the fact that hopefully this is the 0 point from which you then have to rebound into some brightness at some point. Like there's no darker movie than this darker. It's like, let's take Nolan and turn all the contrast off and all the brightness down.
Absolutely.
But I love Matt Reeves as a filmmaker. I think Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, I think, War for the Planet of the Apes are masterpieces. I think, Let the Right One In is fantastic. I think Cloverfield is really smart. I don't think he's made a bad movie. And so for him to sort of kind of get under the hood and dig into, who Batman Year 2 is supposed to be and what that story is, he's a dude with a fucking Dodge Charger that's got a rocket engine in the back of it. Like, like that's just badass.
That's badass.
So yeah, I can't wait for it. I do long for the days of the 110-minute movie. Like,
gone, man.
Give me 150, man. Give me the sweet spot.
Venom gave it to you. It's so funny because Venom, we're doing a rewatch series of all the Batman movies right now on the channel as we lead up to the Batman. And at the time of this taping, we just recorded Batman Returns. And I don't know where you stand in that movie, but I can't stand it. It drives me crazy. But I know there are a lot of people who love it. But what I did say inside of it is, what I will say about Venom and Let There Be Carnage is that they are clearly going after that 90s comic book movie feel, because the day once the Nolan movies kind of came out and then the Marvel started this kind of new phase that we're in now with what comic movies are and the way that we anticipate them, it wasn't that same kind of feel. And when you look at a movie like Batman Returns, you can see that same type of feel when you watch Venom, because it's the lobster scene alone in the first one. But yeah, so I don't know. Do you well, first of all, where do you stand on Batman Returns? And then do you also feel that, Venom was going for that 90s feel?
I feel like Batman Returns, because I also remember podcasting with Kevin about Batman Returns, is that it's the Batman movie in which, and Tim Burton was very clearly not interested in Batman. Like, Batman was his least favorite character because all he wanted to do was the bad guys. I want to do monsters. Right. I want to spend, I think Bruce Wayne or Batman is in like 40 minutes of that first Batman movie.
8 minutes in the first 52 minutes. 8 minutes.
Yeah. Like there's almost nothing. And so the fact that he opens Batman Returns with, let's show you how these people drop their infant child down a sewer, and then he gets raised by penguins, and let's sell Happy Meals off of this is kind of insane. But I appreciate it again. Like I like the Catwoman stuff
Yeah.
more than I like the rest of the Batman stuff. But
Yeah.
I'm not that big a fan of that movie. The one thing I will say is that I think the thing that the '90s were good for, and Marvel has been good for, is making people unafraid to make actual comic book movies feel like comic books. Like those people are wearing the uniforms they wear. Like Captain
Right.
America is in red, white, and blue, and we're not going
Right.
to run away from that.
Right.
And I think that for a while, the DC movies were unwilling to embrace. Like that was the Nolan lesson. Was that it's not a comic book. This is real. It's like, but what if it was also a comic book?
Right.
Because that's not a bad thing. And I think that Wonder Woman embraced the fact that it's a comic book, and but Man of Steel, like why isn't he wearing the red and the blue anymore? Why does this look like rust? Why does this
Right.
uniform feel like it's been out in the sun for too long? And so I think Venom is like very much we're making a comic book movie here. Like we're making a movie that's just kind of like balls to the wall. It's a little bit nuts. It's a little bit insane. It's very much in the spirit of the main character, who's a little bit nuts and a little bit insane. And we're just going to hold on and hope that you all come along for the ride.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah. I do. It's funny with going to Venom. When I saw the first one, and even I understand exactly what they're going for, right? It's not, I just feel that now there's certain things I like more, and there's other things that I like the silliness kind of takes me out of it sometimes. And I can embrace silliness when it comes to something like Peacemaker, and I can embrace silliness because of everything you just said with Peacemaker, of how it just is this kind of perfect blend of shit that shouldn't work that does. And another show, and I don't know if you're watching it or not, that I feel the same since season one, is Cobra Kai. And have you been watching that one?
I haven't been, and I feel bad because I know that I should, because everybody that I like tells me it's great.
It's great. And if you're and what I love about it is that the same way that we geek out about whether it's Batman or Star Wars, Josh Heald and John Hurwitz and Hayden Schlossberg, who are the creators of the show, that's how they geek out about Karate Kid, right? It's their Star Wars, and you can tell they just put everything in it, and they've done this thing with the Karate Kid world that is fascinating. Like, to me, like there's things inside of it. It's got elements of sports entertainment, right? It's got Star Wars. It's got 80s cheese. It's got drama that you actually they can shift to a really silly joke. And then I was watching these reactions of them. I won't spoil it for you if you're going to watch the show, but there's a moment that happens in season 4 that's pretty heartbreaking. And I know, and there was reactions from a lot of the top reaction channels that were doing it, and you see the emotion that it gets out of people, and they're like, "Oh my, no, why did you do that?" And it's just like, and that's the type of show, and you know what I really like about it though too, Mark, is that it's a feel good show right now, and I think we need more of those. Like it's not, especially right now, the last 2 years, it's not a lot of fun shit.
Yeah, and I think that all of the things that I've been responding to, I respond to the ones that are not embarrassed to be what they are.
Yeah.
Like I think the Peacemaker opening credits is the perfect encapsulation of that, where everybody is deadpan, super serious, doing the dumbest fucking shit. And like not embarrassed to be here. No. We're taking it seriously. We're taking ridiculousness seriously.
Yeah.
And like that's why I respond to this stuff. That's why I respond to filmmakers and showrunners and storytellers who know what they're working with and know the sort of arena they're playing in, but don't ever condescend because that's the arena. They elevate because like, I love this stuff. Why would I not take it seriously? Why would these characters not take it seriously? Why would we not think that sort of Karate Kid is this sort of great text of the 1980s? Like, because to us it is. And so we're going to treat it that way. And I think that when you can do that, you'll find success, because you'll find people like us who respond to it because we were also there.
Yeah.
And so when you aren't embarrassed of, whatever elements of Star Wars you're dealing with, you're not embarrassed of whatever elements of the DC universe is, as batshit crazy as it is, we're going to drop like Batmite and Matter Eater Lad references and stuff. Like, that's a guy who is not at all ashamed to have read every one of these comic books and love them and found a way to incorporate them.
Right.
When Marvel is doing sort of deep cuts and then refashioning things when they need to, and like Civil War on the screen was far different from Civil War on the page, but the crux of it is still there. Like
Right.
these two guys who should be best friends and aren't, who have to punch each other till one of them submits. Like, yeah, I want to see that. Of course, I fucking do.
Of course,
Like,
yeah, and you've built it up in the way that you have. It's like you're setting up. It's almost again like setting up, like whether it's a UFC fight or a boxing match or wrestling. I mean, it's like you're setting up these characters for so long. They finally, when it's finally time to collide, that it's almost like a big pay-per-view event. The other trend is a big trend as I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're really leaning in into all of this stuff, whether it's Cobra Kai, No Way Home, the Flashpoint, a lot of different things. The trend at one point, whether it was 3D or whether it was remakes, now the trend is nostalgia, and I'm kind of here for it because it can be dangerous. Because if it's just like, oh, remember that, guys? Yeah, we ain't got nothing else except that. But if you do it right, and I thought No Way Home did it right, I think Cobra Kai is doing it right. I think that there's ways to do it, and I think that if you do it right with Keaton in Flash, you can certainly do it right. So I like this trend. Are you hesitant of it, or are you also kind of embracing it?
I mean, I think that nostalgia is a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
You know, like it almost always works to a point. It's like, you know, empty calories. It's like fucking, you know, Cheez-Its. You know, like the first couple are going to taste great and you'll give me exactly what I want. Can you build a house on this? No. Can you build a diet on this? No. It's a spice. It's not the meat. And so I always get somewhat concerned when the only reason we're doing a thing is because people have nostalgia for it. As opposed to, we found a really interesting thing to say. Like, Creed, for me, is the perfect example of when nostalgia works well, which is we have a whole new story we want to tell, but the only way to tell it is with these characters.
Right.
And so, hey, do you want to come back, Sly? And do you want to be Rocky again? And here's the story we're going to tell. And it's not about you, except it kind of is, but it's about this guy. And he's got his whole other fucking life to live.
Yep.
But by the end of this movie, you're going to play that fucking Rocky theme, and Michael B. Jordan's going to step out in those, like, Star Spangled Trunks, and he's going to punch a dude. I'm here for it all day long.
Right.
You know,
and,
but you know, there's times when it's NOS in a gas tank. Like it burns hot, it burns fast, and then it just sort of evaporates. And I mean, I don't think that was No Way Home. I think No Way Home did a lot with that because it could have just been, look, it's 3 Spider-Men, that's cool, and moved on.
Right.
But then they dug especially into the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man and like found a new story there and found redemption there.
What I loved about that one was it's same thing that I was telling you. We were doing the rewatch. We did all the rewatch for the Spider-Man movies leading up to it, and we kind of thought that they were all going to play in a certain way, so we watched them. But what was so brilliant about it is that all of those movies are now connected to the MCU. They're all part of the MCU. They're all part of it in general of how when you watch it. And I was so glad that I did the rewatch because of exactly what you just said, that the emotional connections of all of them, and not just, Andrew Garfield certainly was the one who stood out the most and has the big moment, you know, that we, for a movie that a lot of people felt disappointing, but the end of that movie with Gwen Stacy, everybody remembers it. And so what he's able to do in that's what you remember. But I don't think Tobey Maguire gets enough credit inside of this movie because Andrew's stealing all the headlines. Is that Tobey Maguire, like that third movie? Some people love the Raimi third movie. I think it's incredibly stupid. But when there's that meme of him dancing all the time, and he didn't shake that. But the fact that they embrace it, that he was like, yeah, I kind of went through some shit, and I got more mature, and he presented himself as a more people. Oh, he's just playing Toby. No, he's kind of a mature Spider-Man, and you understand where he was. And I thought that they played all three of the guys really well, even where Tom Holland winds up going. So I agree that it could have just been nostalgia, but it had a nice arc to it.
Yeah. So like when nostalgia is being used by people who respect the power of it, and use it in like tiny places, and like it's a sprinkle, guys. It is not our main seasoning because too much of it just becomes like caramel.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, I can't, my mouth is filled with it. I can't even move my teeth anymore. Like I'm being like welded shut by this sweet cloying thing that is nostalgia.
Getting me hungry for caramel, I'll tell you that.
See, look what I did there. This episode is brought to you by the caramel.
The caramel. We got a sponsorship by Caramel. Let me check the inbox. 100%. No, you're right though. You're right. But I'm not going to let you get away with bringing up Creed and not talking about it. Like, so I'm like, Rocky's my thing. Right? I love the Rocky movies and Creed. I don't know. Are you familiar with the story on how that all got made?
Some of it, like I'm the pieces that I'm familiar with is that, Ryan Coogler and, a sort of childhood friend, sort of like for Ryan, it meant the world. Like he was like, these were the movies that I watched with my dad.
Yep.
And my dad passed away.
Yep.
And so like, I want to get a chance to sort of pay homage to my dad and what these movies meant by telling a story of fathers and sons and a son without a father and legacy and all that stuff. And that ultimately is what hooked Stallone, who was like, yeah, you know what? I got kids. I'm a dad. I understand that I've been living with this character since forever. Like, if this is how we put him to bed, and I think there had been a draft of the script where Rocky doesn't survive that movie.
Was that it? I know that Stallone passed on it the first time around, and then he watched Fruitvale Station. And then he said, oh, wait a minute, I want to take a meeting with this guy. Because the funny thing is, I remember in 2003 or 2004, so I was at the Comedy Store, and my buddy Steve Simone, I was there with him, and I was telling him, I said, I have an idea about a Creed prequel, and I wanted to do a Apollo Creed story, almost like mimicking the Muhammad Ali story, but back in like the 50s and 60s, and kind of how he's coming up, and I was like, that's gonna work. And then I hear this coming, I'm like, yeah, theirs is better. and hearing it, because I felt Fruitvale Station had me like, I was in tears watching that movie, and I said, and that was the first time going, wait a minute, who's that? The director. Michael B. Jordan I had known from The Wire and other things, but I'm like, who is that? And then hearing that he was going to do Creed, and then I actually had the opportunity to talk to him. I went to Philadelphia to see a screening of it, and I got to talk to him. I got to talk to Sly, and I got to talk to Michael B. Jordan about it. And it's what you were just talking about. It's that nostalgia sprinkle, but you got to have the passion behind it, and you got to have the drive for it, and you got to have the overall. This is what we're doing here, and that's our end goal. And they had that, and then some. But how do you feel about Michael B. Jordan taking over for Creed 3 and no Stallone? Can it survive without that major nostalgia now, with Stallone being the major piece?
I think that it's in a way it's fitting, right? Because Stallone made his directorial debut on Rocky movies, ultimately because they wanted to make more, and he was like, if you really want to make another one of these, then I have to direct it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I guess we need a Rocky 3, so let's go have a Rocky 3.
Yeah.
And then that's also the movie that loses Mickey, that the trainer is gone. And so there is this sort of nice sort of, history repeating itself, where Michael B. Jordan is making his directorial debut on the third of his quote unquote Rocky movies, which will be, without Stallone involved. Like, he no longer has Rocky as his trainer.
Right.
I think it's a bold move for Michael B, because, if he wants to step into that arena, and it's clear that he does, this is the muscle that you flex to get that done. I think he knows the character as well as anybody does. I think he surrounded himself with smart people who can help him make that movie, and because, Jesus, like making a $70 million movie where you're the star and also the director, and you've got to be training, and you've got to be fighting, and you've got to be in almost every frame. Yep. Like you've got to surround yourself with the best team possible. And I think he has, but I wasn't as big a fan of Creed 2 as I was of Creed 1. Same. I don't know if I will, unless you tell me this is the Clubber Lang story, in which case then yeah, I'm back on board. And if Jonathan Majors is playing like Clubber Lang Jr.,
yeah,
great.
Then I'm in.
Yeah. But I will still see it. Like, again, like the same way that we're Star Wars fans, we will see every Star Wars, no matter how good, bad, or indifferent they are. I'm a Rocky fan, and so I will see every Rocky.
It's got to be better than. It's always the same answer. It's got to be better than 5. It's always. The same. It's gonna. 5 would have been so good for 2 reasons, 2 things that really get me about 5. First of all, put it in the ring at the end. It's like, oh, the doctor's like, we're just kidding. You're all right. And then he fights. He's able to fight in the ring. If it ends in the ring with the same shit that happened all the way leading, much better movie. That's part 1. Part 2 is this is the heavyweight champion of the world, and the guy that was the biggest underdog of all time. Nobody's going to give this guy a sponsorship. Nobody. He's going to let him live in the old shitty neighborhood. Nobody's going to come in and give him a commercial. I don't care if he can't read like he did back in the day. It's Rocky. Put him in a video game commercial. It's stupid.
Right. Yeah. I like Rocky Balboa more than I like Rocky
Me too.
5.
Me too. I liked Rocky Balboa a lot. I thought that even though, you know, you can say what you want about that real HBO style of boxing, which is fun. It's fine, but he got back to the roots in that one, and he would walk, and what I was just saying. There's that scene that he has with his son when he walks in that was so significantly different in 5. In 5, he's walking around the neighborhood like he did in number 1 before he fought Creed. In Rocky Balboa, he walks into a place and everybody wants to take pictures with him, and everybody wants to, oh, there's the champ. It's like, okay, we've seen athletes lose their money, but there's no shot that an athlete that's lost all their money walks in and people don't treat him like that's the champ. There's the guy, you know,
in his hometown.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, but anyway, the little things like that. But before, there are a couple of other movies that I wanted to talk about and things, but I wanted to talk about you and like what do you got? What are you doing right now? What's the latest project? Because you wrote a full episode of Masters, right?
I wrote a full episode of Masters in the first sort of chunk.
Yes.
Which was a ton of fun because, you know, Kevin Smith, who I'm not sure if you know this, was running the show, is also both a talented writer and a very kind showrunner. You know, and was like, hey, listen, we got great people in this room to come and help me make this show. I'm going to listen to what they have to say. I'll choose the things that I like and don't like, but everybody gets their moment in the sun, and everybody gets their moment to sort of, you know, advocate for what they think is going to be great in this show. So I did that. I think that same summer, I wrote an episode of Critical Role, The Legend of Vox Machina.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Which, and this was like 2 years ago, which is now coming out, I think, on January 28th. So I think in like 3 weeks, not even 3 weeks, 8 days, 3 weeks. Me and math, not good friends. but yeah, Legend of Vox Machina is dropping on the 28th, and I think I wrote episode 7, but the run order is always a mystery to me, like it's out of my hands. And certainly that was a boatload of fun to do. Like, and I was not a Critical Role fan. Like, I'm not a critter. I was just a dude that they hired who can write shit, and sort of came into play, and was so surprised by how warm and open these guys were about this world that they had created and they had been living in for years.
Yeah.
You know, like Matthew Mercer, who was the DM who invented this out of whole cloth, you know, was like, hey man, like, I never thought about that, but if you think that could work, then yeah, let's do that. Oh, sure. Maybe that's the way this religion works. Maybe this. And he was more than willing to engage with the thought experiments that the writers would have, some of which he knew the world very well, and some of which, like me, were like, I don't know what this means, but here's, I think, what story would work. It's like, that's right.
But isn't that's see, to me, that's the thing where it can work brilliantly. I know Matt's a great dude, but like where you can do you know what you want to do. You have those people in the room that do know the world. They do know the stuff upside down. But as you said, you bring in people who can write that want to learn it because they've got the gig. So they're going to learn. Like, I'm sure like once you got the gig, you were doing your research to figure out how it worked. But but the thing is, well, if someone says in the room, well, Marc Bernardin, he doesn't know anything about it. Who gives a shit? He's a great writer. Bring him in. We'll tell him maybe he can come up with some great ideas, and then it pushes forward. That's encouraging to hear in general, because I don't always feel like people need to, everything comes back to Star Wars, but like I don't feel that people need to be hardcore fans of things to necessarily make it work, but they've got to embrace it and love it when they're working on it, because otherwise it's just a gig, and you can tell that it's just like, you know, I'm just here.
It's like you have to be able to recognize the things in it that people are in love with, and to kind of find your way to understand where that love comes from,
right?
You know, but to also be able to question it, you know. And I think that remains one of the problems with Star Wars, where, you know, and I remember encountering this on the special features for episode 1, where George would show the movie to people and they would all say, George, that's great. That's amazing. You fucking did it, George. And nobody said
McCallum effect.
Yeah. Like, hey man, like, I don't know if this is holding together. Oh, hey man, maybe we're cutting away too many times from our main story to this kid in the cockpit of this ship. Like you need to be able to have people who can question it, and then you can take those questions as a creator and see, why are they asking me these questions? And I know that it's not from a place of hate, but it's from a place of, could we be doing this better?
Right.
And I think that Matthew and Bill Willingham and Sam Riegel and all those guys were incredibly generous with their world and with their time and helping to get a newbie up to speed, but also like, hey, great idea wins. Who's got one? If it plays directly into the mythos, awesome. If it's a brand new thing that doesn't like fuck with the mythos, just as great.
Yeah, I agree. And hearing you talk about this stuff and watching you beat around, whether you're around people like around Kevin, well, are you in Clerks 3?
I'm not sure if I can say, but I did fly to New Jersey to
look at things, to look at things. So the reason I asked that too, because watching being around Kevin, and you'd been in other stuff that he did, and do you want to do like, I know that obviously with writing that's the first thing, but do you want to pursue directing as well?
It's funny. Like I wasn't sure, because seeing Kevin do it, seeing other people, other friends of mine who do it, it's an all-encompassing, insane job to do. But I made myself a promise that I was like, by the time I turn 50, I'm going to direct something. And I did. Like, I made a short film, just last December. We spent, 2 weeks in prep and 4 days of shooting, and now we're in post on it. And, I'm still not sure if it's a thing that I would want to do going forward, because it is so taxing. It is so demanding. I don't know how people like Kevin, have the fortitude and the both intestinal and cranial to be able to do that on a long-term basis. It's hard.
It is, but the only reason I definitely asked you is because just listen, I mean, before even having this conversation, listen to you, being a fan of yours, and having, like, you've got that eye that's not just the writer's eye, that you watch it in a certain way. Even when listening to you talk about Arcane, yeah, you're approaching it from the writer's view, but it's that visual side and the way that you explain things that I just thought that with that gift and talent that you already have with writing, a lot of the directors don't have that. Kevin's got it, obviously. A lot of directors don't have that, where they got to get the script, but having it, being able to do that, and you got friends in high places. So
it's funny, and the other thing about it is, when you're directing a movie, you're living with that movie for like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Whereas I could write an episode of Masters this week, next week I can go write an episode of this thing, and
right.
I'll spend 6 months on one show, and then I'll bounce, and then like Picard, I was on for the when the hell was that? That was, God, was it 2019, 2020? I don't remember how dates work anymore, but it was like 6 months. Right in the middle of the pandemic, like I was on Picard, and there was a great experience. I had a blast. My time in the Final Frontier came to an end, and I went on to something else.
Right.
But if you're making a movie, if you're making a fucking Black Panther movie, you're Black Panthering for 4 years.
For years, yeah. Well, but here's the thing though with that. So in that 4 years, and some people, because you also, like you said, you have the luxury, not luxury, but I mean, you've been able to have a job. No, it may not be there after the first season, and then you're able to bounce to something else, right? You've had that reputation enough. People are confident enough with your work. You're going to get a gig. But it is still scary. Like, even like you said, when you're working on Picard, and so talk to me about that. When you're on a show that, I don't know whether or not how you felt when you got Picard, if you said this is going to stick around a little bit, and then it doesn't, right? Like, is it one of those moments, like, sometimes I'm sure you might be looking around and saying, all right, well, then I'm going to start looking around and start working on this. And other times it's like, shit, I don't want to start looking around again. I just had this.
Yeah. There's the constant push and pull. I feel it more today than I did when I first started, because, when I was doing like Treadstone and Castle Rock,
right, it
was, am I ever going to get another job? And I went like a year between gigs on both of those shows, because like I was new, I was young-ish, younger, and didn't have that momentum yet. Like, I had a couple of, like, the shows were hot, whatever that counts as, but like nobody knew who I was as much as they knew what the shows were. And so that time between got to be like, I could use a job 6 months later. I could really use a job 8 months later. Boy, job would be amazing right now.
Right.
Whereas now I'm at the place, thankfully, knock on wood, it's a blessed, privileged place to be, where I'm like, maybe I'll take a couple months off.
Right.
Maybe I'll just kind of put the brain to bed. But I'm still a little bit that kid who's not sure if the next job is going to show.
It's bitch of the business, right? It's the bitch of the business.
It's like, I got a kid going to college. Like, maybe now's not the time to take a couple months off, buddy.
Is he going to college now? I think when I first met yours.
Yeah.
I think he's still in high school when he came to the Schmodown, right?
I mean, no, he was no. You met him Fast 7, I think it was a screening for one of the Fast movies. I
Maybe
feel
no,
like it
no.
was.
I think you took him to a Schmodown match. I think he came in. He came.
Oh
To,
yeah,
I think he came in the Collider.
yeah. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think he was like 13 then.
Wow. Oh, dude, my oldest is 10, and it's like it just flies, man. It just fucking flies.
Yeah.
Anyway, so last thing to ask you about before I let you go, and thank you so much for being so generous for your time today. But when your show that you've been doing with Kevin, Fatman and Batman, you guys have been doing it. How long? Because and you probably answered this a million times, and I apologize. But how did that show come about, and how did you meet Kevin in the first place? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
I met Kevin when I was working for Entertainment Weekly.
Okay.
I was assigned to do an interview with him. I think it was. I don't remember what it was around. It was it must have been like Zach and Miri.
Okay.
And so I did like a short interview. Like it went fine, whatever, went away. Then Zach and Miri Make a Porno was about to be released. And I was like, I want to do a filmography with this dude. Like he's made enough movies. Let's just walk it through. And he said, okay, great. Listen, but could we do it over instant message? Like I'm a writer. I'd much rather write than talk. This was pre-podcast Kevin.
Right,
so I'd much rather write than talk. And so we did it over instant message. And every now and again, he would just pop up on my IM. At first, it was like, hey, man, do I use a semicolon or a comma here? It's like, hey, man, which one of these sentences sounds better? You're a journalist. You know how this works. Right. I'm writing a letter to somebody. What do I do here? And then we'd be like, hey, man, did you see the Hulk? And I'd be like, yeah, I saw the Hulk. And then it was, hey, man, I got a poker game in New Jersey in the Secret Stash. Do you play poker? And at the time I was living in New Jersey and I did play poker. So I said, sure. It's like, you should come down and roll some cards. And so I did a couple times. And then I would come out to LA and then he would say, hey, you come to the house and see the movie. It's like, all right, I'll come in the house and see the movie. And then when I moved to LA, he said, hey, man, I got this podcast to do with my wife in the morning. Do you want to come by and be a guest? +1 with me and Jen. I said, sure. So after that, it's like, hey, man, that was fun. I got this Batman podcast. Do you want to come by and be a guest on it? I said, sure. Hey, man, that was fun. Let's do a commentary track for the Dark Knight Returns Part 1. All right. Hey, man, that was fun. Do you want to be the co-host of this thing? Sure. Like, hey, man, basically everything that I do with Kevin is Kevin saying, hey, man, and I just say yes.
It's been what a run it has, and isn't it funny how that all works out with just it's all about chemistry too, right? Because it's that's how with Mark Ellis and I we just kind of met we met through friends, and then from being a Comedy Store and all that, and it just kind of evolving. And it's funny how you like talking to somebody, and then strangely enough, people like hearing you talk about it because you're having a good time and you're not bullshitting about it. And I think that's what's fun about you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's we are both dyed from the same cloth in a way.
Yeah.
Like we're both East Coast guys. We're both nerds. We're both fat. Some of us fatter than we used to be. Some of us less so. We both love this stuff deeply.
Yeah.
And the only thing that we want from each other is to be able to talk about it, and to have a person for whom there's enough shared references, but also enough like new shit that we can learn, which is like, I didn't grow up with Kev. Like I met him as a grown ass person. And so there's a whole wealth of life experience that I have and that he has that neither of us are privy to. And so kind of like getting to know a person that you already have a lot in common with. Like we just started dating and then it became a long-term thing.
It's a great thing. It's all, and you say East Coast. Are you not from Jersey? Are you from?
I'm from New York.
Oh, what part of New York are you from?
I was born in the Bronx. Grew up on the South Shore of Long Island. Grew up in a town called Baldwin.
I'm from Queens, so we were probably in the area around the same. I spent a lot of time in Long Island also, so we probably
yeah. Like I lived in Woodside for a couple of years when I first moved out of the house, and then moved to Jersey when I got married, and
that was it.
Always a New Yorker though, even though I've lived every place else longer.
Well, now I know why we get along so well. Look at that. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Marc Bernardin. And where can they and obviously for those people who don't know, for Fatman and Batman, you can get it on Apple Podcasts and all that. But so it's on Kevin's YouTube channel, and is there a particular date? Is there a time?
In a perfect world, we would be every Tuesday night. And when we're shooting it live at the Cantina, those are the nights that we do it.
Yeah.
At the Scum and Villainy Cantina on Hollywood Boulevard in Hollywood, California. But now it's more like Tuesday, Wednesdays on youtube.com/Kevin Smith. And there's like every episode we've ever shot, I think is still up there. I think you can get a decent chunk of the backlog on, Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever. Or if you join that Kevin Smith club, you have access to every episode that's ever been done.
Well, make sure you guys go check that out. It's a great show. It's a lot of fun. And if you're not following Marc Bernardin on Twitter, please do. He's a great follow there, and check out his work because the guy is very, very talented. And I hope to do this again with you, man. Hopefully, we can do it in person next time once this shit starts to go down a little bit.
Would love to. This was a blast.
Thanks, brother. All right, man. Marc Bernardin. And for you guys, once again, just a reminder, please subscribe. As I mentioned to you before, we're always looking for people to show an ounce of class to do that. Go ahead and do that, please. Will you do that? And hit that Apple Podcasts, Big Thing, Spotify, all of it. It's a big thing. We'll see you next time.